I spent years invisible to the Mafia boss, until the Alpha King claimed me in front of everyone. The chandeliers above the Javits Center glittered like frozen lightning, too bright against the sterile white of marble and steel. I moved between them like a ghost in silk, composed, unnoticed, necessary. My clipboard was tucked close to my chest, the edges sharp against my ribs, grounding me as I breathed past the ache in my heels and the ache under my skin. I didn't belong here. Not really. Not among the men who whispered in code and the women who wore their diamonds like shields. But I made myself belong, one flawless event at a time. 2 years of orchestrating peace between criminals who'd rather slit throats than shake hands. And for most of that time, I'd been in the orbit of Harvey DeLuca, the man who never touched me, never claimed me, but never let me leave. I told myself that meant something, that maybe tonight it would change. "Confirm seating for Vieri's table," Marco said without looking at me, already moving on. Harvey's consigliere. The voice behind the mask, the voice that always reminded me I was useful, not essential. I gave a quiet nod and made the adjustment, swallowing the sting in my throat. The room was a war disguised as elegance. Territory cloaked in tuxedos, I didn't flinch when the shifters entered. Tall, quiet, predatory. Wolves in tailored clothing. I'd worked with them before. I knew the rules. What I didn't know was that tonight the rules were about to change. Because that was the moment I felt it. Not seen, not touched, but claimed. A gaze sharp enough to slice through layers of control, I turned instinctively, my heart knocking once hard, and found him. Kyle Ravensthorn, Alpha King of the Nightclaw Pack. He didn't blink, didn't look away, just watched me like something he already owned. And somewhere across the room, Harvey DeLuca noticed, but he looked away, and that was all the permission Kyle needed. If you're listening right now, help me prove my mother wrong. She said I wouldn't reach 2,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe and comment what city you are watching from. Now, let's continue. The ice bucket had started to sweat before I did. I stood near the back of the reception hall, hands steady, expression neutral, as Harvey DeLuca made his entrance. He wore midnight, black silk suit, black tie, black gaze, and he didn't look at me. Not once. He moved like power given shape, men trailing behind him like shadows. Marco Vieri at his left shoulder, 2 others behind. One of them scanned the crowd, the other watched the doors. I didn't exist to any of them, which was normal, expected. Still, my chest tightened, quiet and sharp, like a string drawn too tight inside me. 2 years. 2 years coordinating his meetings, smoothing over his enemies, translating his silence into something just this side of diplomacy. 2 years of dinners without touch, stolen glances without follow-up, lingering moments that never became anything else. I had thought, tonight might be different. It was a foolish thought. I knew that the moment he brushed past me without a glance. I caught a hint of his cologne, smoke and spice and something I hadn't let myself name. And then he was gone. Already shaking hands with the Nightclaw envoy. Like I hadn't just spent 6 hours making sure the lighting over their table was subdued enough for shifters with hypersensitive sight. Already listening to Marco outline the schedule. Already forgetting I was in the room. My throat felt dry. I stepped away toward the far edge of the ballroom into a pocket of quiet behind a service partition. I didn't need to check the mirror. I already knew what I looked like. Perfect, unremarkable, forgettable, exactly how he liked me. I pulled out my tablet and made a note. Room 3B ready for the post-dinner breakout. And when I returned to the floor, my smile was in place again. The kind that didn't reach my eyes. The kind that said, "Everything is fine. Thank you for asking. Move along." Across the room, Kyle Ravensthorn had arrived. No fanfare. No entourage. Just presence. The kind that silenced conversations without effort. He stood near the edge of the room, still as a monolith, his dark eyes scanning the ballroom like he was reading a battlefield. I wasn't even in his line of sight. Not directly, but I felt him, like gravity. People didn't approach him. They noticed him, yes, watched him, whispered about him, but no one crossed that invisible threshold, not yet. He was waiting. I turned away before I could stare longer than was appropriate. Shifters could smell attention, hunger, weakness. "Miss Lena," Marco said beside me, too close. "Could you see to the wine at table 1? Harvey prefers the Barolo tonight." Of course he did. I nodded, moved. My heels clicked across the floor, echoing too loud in my ears. I took the bottle, fresh from the cellar, and returned to table 1. Harvey's table, where he sat at the center of everything and looked straight through me. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't even nod. I poured his wine, tilted the label toward Marco for verification, then moved to the next guest. When I got to the end of the table, someone else approached. A brunette in red silk with flawless bone structure and the kind of self-assurance that came from either blood or marriage. She leaned down, whispered something in Harvey's ear, and he smiled. Not a full one. Not the real one. The rare, quiet kind I'd seen only a handful of times and hoarded like secrets. But still, it was enough to break something. I didn't drop the bottle. I didn't freeze. I just finished the pour, gave a nod, and walked away. And that was it. No scene, no drama, just a clean break. A silent dismissal from a man who had never truly claimed me. A message, clear as crystal stemware. You are no one. You've always been no one. I made it back to the coat room hallway before my hands started to shake. Just a tremble. Just enough to feel it. I braced a palm against the wall, the cool marble grounding me as I pulled in a breath. This wasn't new. This was just the first time he'd done it in public, and for some reason, that made it real. "Breathe," I whispered to myself. "Breathe, fix your face, and go back in." But I didn't get the chance, because when I turned, Kyle Raventhorn was there. No sound, no warning, just presence. He was taller up close than I remembered, broader. The tailored jacket couldn't soften the way his body held space, not like a man, but like something older. The air around him ran colder. The light dimmed at the edges. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was low and deep and quiet, like velvet wrapped around iron. I hadn't even realized I was still leaning against the wall. I straightened, too quickly. "Yes, thank you." A pause. That wasn't the question I asked. I looked up at him then, met his eyes. They were dark, not brown, darker. Something that didn't catch the light so much as consume it. He wasn't handsome the way Harvey was. Harvey had polish, charm, menace in a gilded frame. Kyle didn't need polish. He was raw, dangerous, and looking at me like I'd done something to him simply by existing. I dropped my gaze first. "I'm fine," I said again, quieter. "You're not," he said, "but you will be." The way he said it made it sound less like comfort and more like prophecy. I didn't know how to answer. My fingers curled around the edges of my tablet like it might anchor me. He took a step closer. Not threatening, not quite, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, the electric prickle of energy at the edges of his skin. "You have his scent on you," he said. It wasn't a question, more like a judgment. I opened my mouth, closed it. Kyle looked down at me, head tilted slightly, like a wolf scenting wind, and the air between us shifted. "You don't belong to him," he said, softer now. "You never did." I swallowed. Something in my chest buckled. "I didn't say I did." "No," he agreed, "but you thought it." And with that, he turned and walked away. No permission, no explanation, just one last glance over his shoulder, one that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. And then he vanished into the crowd. I stood there a moment longer. No one else noticed, No one else cared, but I felt it the moment the balance of the room changed. Because Kyle hadn't spoken to Harvey. He hadn't paid tribute. He hadn't acknowledged the hierarchy. He'd spoken to me, watched me, claimed me with silence and space, and in a room full of people who only saw me when I was useful, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The air inside the ballroom shifted. Not loudly, not obviously. Just a subtle thinning, a stillness, like the moment before a storm breaks, but no thunder followed. Just silence, and then a different kind of power moved through the room. Kyle Raventhorn was walking toward me. I didn't notice right away. I'd just returned from the corridor, weaving my way past servers and whispers and the low pulse of strings from the stage. I kept my eyes down, tried to stay small. Somewhere to my left, Harvey laughed at something Marco said. It was that deep, restrained kind of laugh he used when he wanted people to see how little anything touched him. I was halfway to the edge of the floor when the weight of attention caught me. Not mine. Everyone else's. People were turning, watching, conversations faltering mid-sentence. The atmosphere shifted again. Reverence, tension, wariness, all of it directed at a single movement, a single man. Kyle didn't walk like anyone else in the room. He didn't glide, he didn't swagger, he didn't pretend he was dangerous. He didn't have to. His path carved itself open in front of him. Men parting like instinct recognized something older than fear, and he wasn't coming for anyone else. He was walking straight toward me. I froze. Everything in me screamed to move, to vanish into the walls like I always did, but my feet rooted to the ground. I couldn't run. I couldn't pretend anymore that he wasn't looking at me like I was the only reason he'd come. He didn't stop until we were nearly chest to chest. No words, no hello, no preamble. Just the space between us charged with something primal, ancient, and undeniable. I opened my mouth, maybe to ask what he was doing, maybe to beg him not to, but he reached up before I could speak. And with one hand, Kyle touched me. Fingertips brushed my jaw, slow, deliberate, then slid up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, the most intimate, unassuming gesture in the world. Except it wasn't. Not here. Not now. His hand lingered a breath longer than necessary. Every eye in the ballroom followed it. I heard someone gasp. Maybe me. Behind Kyle, I caught sight of Elder Thalos rising from his seat. Slowly, not in objection, in recognition. And across the room, Harvey DeLuca stood. I didn't turn. I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. I could feel the heat of his fury from where I stood, controlled, contained, but volcanic. I knew that rage intimately, the way it stayed leashed behind sharp suits and sharp words, the way it made people disappear quietly, but Kyle wasn't afraid of it. He looked at me like I was already his, and then he said it, low, barely above the strings still humming in the air, but loud enough that the power in his voice rippled out like a command. You are not his. A beat. You were never his. I couldn't breathe. He stepped even closer, not touching me now, but it didn't matter. The gesture had already been made. The claim had already been spoken, not loud, but final. His eyes never left mine. Mine, he said, quieter now, not to the room, just to me. I didn't know what that meant, not in the way he did, but my body understood something before my mind caught up. My skin buzzed, my pulse roared. Every cell in me leaned toward him, like I'd been waiting my whole life to hear that word from someone who meant it. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. Which, in a room full of supernatural beings, meant everything. Then Harvey's voice cut through the air like a blade. Kyle. He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. It was that cold tone. The one that could still a room, the one that had ended lives with a nod. Kyle turned his head slowly, casually, as if only now noticing that the other king in the room had decided to speak. They looked at each other, and the space between them filled with violence neither of them unleashed. I'd seen Harvey with enemies before, with rivals. He was always calm, always collected, always 4 moves ahead, but this wasn't that. His expression was carved from granite, cold rage and expensive armor. His jaw clenched once, just enough for Marco beside him to step forward. "Alpha Raventhorn," Marco said smoothly, "you're crossing into sensitive ground." "Noted," Kyle said. "And yet," Marco added, "you continue." Kyle's mouth curved slightly, a smile that wasn't friendly. "I didn't come to play by your rules." "This is neutral ground," Harvey said quietly, "so I'm claiming what's mine peacefully." "She's not yours." "She is now." The room held its breath. I stood between them like a live wire, the center of something spiraling out of control. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Kyle's hand and run, or maybe fall into Harvey's arms and beg him to stop this before it went too far. But neither man looked at me, because to them, in this moment, I wasn't a person. I was a boundary, a battlefield. Kyle turned back to me, gaze softer again. "She has a choice," he said. But he said it like he already knew the answer. Harvey's silence spoke louder than any protest. No one moved, no one breathed, and then, like a curtain pulled back, I understood. This wasn't just about me. This was about bloodlines, about ancient magic, about a hidden thread in me I didn't know existed, until Kyle touched me, and something buried deep in my chest flared to life. It didn't hurt. It glowed, a spark, a thrum of something waking up inside me. I swayed slightly. Kyle's hand steadied me. Not forceful, not possessive. Just there. I looked at Harvey then. Finally. And what I saw wasn't control or calculation. It wasn't leadership. It was fear. Not of Kyle, of me. Because now he saw it too. Whatever I was, whatever Kyle saw, it had never belonged to Harvey. And now it never would. I turned back toward Kyle. Didn't nod, didn't speak, just stood and stayed. The claim held. The room shifted again. The wolves bowed their heads. The humans stared. Harvey DeLuca said nothing, but the war in his eyes had already begun. The car was too quiet. Not in the way limousines usually were. Thick windows, heavy doors, the hum of New York sealed out like a secret, but in the way a storm feels quiet before it breaks. Tension pressed against the inside of my skin, but Kyle didn't speak. He hadn't since we left the Javits Center. 1 minute I'd been standing between 2 kings, surrounded by power and politics and the weight of 100 eyes. The next, I was in the back seat of a black SUV, the city blurring past in red and gold. I should have protested, demanded an explanation, a choice, a plan. But Kyle had opened the car door and held out his hand, and my body moved before my mind caught up. Now I sat beside him, close but not touching, while his driver took turns with the precision of someone trained for more than traffic. Kyle finally spoke. "You're quiet." I swallowed. "I'm thinking." "What about?" I looked out the window. Lights, asphalt, a billboard for a Broadway show I couldn't afford to see. Whether I made a mistake. He didn't flinch, just nodded once, like he'd expected that answer. "Did you?" "I don't know." Silence again. But not the same kind. This time it felt like he was waiting, for me to ask, or accuse, or run. But I couldn't. Not yet. "What happens now?" I asked instead. Kyle turned his head slowly, his eyes catching mine. Even in the low light, they gleamed with something not entirely human. "We go home." I blinked. "You're home?" He nodded. "Pack territory." "Where is that exactly?" His mouth tilted at the corner, like the question amused him. "You'll see." I didn't ask again. 30 minutes later, the skyline gave way to something older. The streets narrowed, the buildings fell behind. We passed through a security gate without stopping, and the world beyond it looked nothing like New York. Trees, darkness, air that smelled like pine and rain and earth. The SUV pulled into a long, winding driveway and stopped in front of a building that didn't quite fit any one category. Not a house, not a fortress, something in between, stone and wood, lanterns glowing softly from the archways, and silence, broken only by the distant sound of running water and the occasional rustle of wind through branches. Kyle got out first. I hesitated. The door opened beside me, not by Kyle, another man, tall, pale, dark-eyed. He nodded once. "Miss Lena," he said, his voice deep and precise. I stepped out, the air hitting my lungs colder than I expected. Crisper, cleaner, like the city had been noise and I hadn't noticed until now. Kyle waited a few feet away. When our eyes met, he gave a slight tilt of his head, not an order, an invitation. I followed him through the entrance. The inside was warm, high ceilings, firelight, stone floors softened by thick rugs. There were people, men mostly, and a few women, moving quietly through the space, all of them glancing at me, then away. Not unfriendly, not surprised, more like they were assessing a ripple before it became a wave. Kyle didn't slow. He led me down a corridor and into a room that looked like something from an ancient estate. Velvet curtains, shelves lined with old books, a fireplace with real flames. He gestured to the chair near it. "Sit." I sat. He stood across from me, arms crossed, the fire casting shadows across his face. "Do you know what I did tonight?" he asked. I forced a breath past the knot in my chest. "You claimed me." "Yes." My fingers curled around the arms of the chair. "You touched me, in front of everyone, and said I was yours. That's what a claim is, without asking." He didn't flinch. "I saw what I wanted. I saw what was already mine. I made it clear. And if I'd said no, I would have stopped." Something in me eased, just slightly. "But you didn't," he added, voice lower now. "Your body knew before you did." I looked away, too fast. "That wasn't permission. It was instinct. And that makes it okay?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "It makes it real." I stood. The space between us crackled. "Then explain it," I said. "All of it, because I don't know what the hell I just agreed to." Kyle watched me for a long, quiet moment. Then he said, "You carry blood you don't understand. Blood that comes from a line older than most in this city. Tonight, that blood was recognized. By you? By everyone." I shook my head. I'm not one of you." "No," he agreed. "But you could be." I laughed, short, harsh. "That's not how biology works. Blood remembers, Mary, even when you don't." He moved to the fireplace, picked up a small box from the mantel, and opened it. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a pendant, silver, circular, engraved with a symbol I didn't recognize. He held it out to me. "This belonged to your grandmother." I didn't move. "I don't have a grandmother." "You did," he said. "She was born Elira Voss, a human who carried latent wolf blood. She disappeared in 1962. Killed, we thought, but she ran, vanished into the city, changed her name, started a new life, and her blood came down through your mother, to you." I couldn't breathe. I reached out slowly and touched the pendant. It was warm. "I'm not," my voice cracked. "I've never shifted. You won't. Not unless the blood is awakened fully, but that doesn't make it any less real. We recognize our own." I stared at the symbol. "It's why you noticed me. It's why I couldn't ignore you." I looked up at him. There was no arrogance in his face, no triumph, just truth. What happens if I reject the claim? You can. But the supernatural world won't forget what it saw tonight. They won't unsee it, and Harvey won't forgive it. So I'm… what? Stuck? You're protected. Because I'm yours? His eyes darkened, but his voice stayed level. No, because you're you. I didn't believe him, not yet, but I wanted to. Kyle moved toward the door. There's a room prepared for you. You can rest, or think, or scream. No one will disturb you. I didn't move. He paused in the doorway. When you're ready, he said, we'll talk about what it means to wear the mark of the wolves. Then he left. And I was alone with firelight, a pendant I didn't understand, and a truth that felt too big for my body. I was claimed. But maybe I'd always belonged to something I didn't know existed, until now. The room smelled like forest after rain, green and wild and alive. I stood at the center of a semicircle of stone, surrounded by ancient faces and older stares, and tried not to flinch as they judged me without speaking. This was the den. Not a building, not a meeting room. It was a chamber carved into the bedrock beneath Kyle's territory. Part council hall, part sanctum, part courtroom. The ceiling arched high above us like a cathedral, lit only by torches flickering against the rock, casting moving shadows on the walls. The floor beneath my boots felt warm somehow, pulsing gently like the earth itself was listening. 7 elders faced me, each seated on a stone throne, each a piece of the old world, wearing flesh like it was a borrowed thing. At the far end, at the heart of it all, Kyle stood with arms crossed, his gaze locked on the council. Not on me, not now. This wasn't his moment. This was mine. Elder Thalos spoke first. His voice echoed off the stone, measured and sharp, honed by centuries of politics and power. She does not shift. She has no known bond, no pack loyalty, no training. She is human in blood and mind. Not entirely, Kyle answered. Calm, certain. Her blood carries the Voss line. That hasn't been confirmed. Kyle nodded toward the figure on his left. A younger wolf, maybe in his 40s, stepped forward with a tablet in hand. He projected a scan, biometric readings glowing in the air like blue fire. She's dormant, he said, but the markers are there. Recessive, latent, but undeniable. Which makes her unstable, Thalos snapped. A danger. She hasn't shown aggression, said another elder, a woman with long silver hair braided like vines. Nor fear. She carries Kyle's scent, Thalos replied. And his bond. That makes her loyal, blindly. A flush rose in my cheeks, sharp and hot. I'm standing right here, I said before I could stop myself. 7 pairs of eyes turned to me. Kyle said nothing. Let me speak. I stepped forward. You're talking about me like I'm a weapon, or a threat, or a pet someone brought home without permission. My heart was pounding, but I didn't back down. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be claimed or dragged into your politics, or to find out that my blood isn't what I thought it was. Silence. The kind that judged. But here I am. I didn't run. I didn't hide. And whatever you think I am, I'm not helpless. The silver-haired elder studied me with new eyes. You do not smell like prey. She smells like the storm before a shift, Kyle said. A murmur ran through the chamber. Enough, Thalos said. A bond can be faked. Power can be borrowed. We've seen this before. Not like this, Kyle said, and his voice dropped, low and final. Then he moved. Crossed the room in 3 steps until he was behind me, not touching, but close enough that I could feel his presence wrap around me like heat from a fire. She's mine, he said, but not owned, not silenced. She walks here by choice. She stood in front of Harvey DeLuca and didn't flinch. She let the world see her claimed, and she's still standing. The air vibrated with that word, claimed. Not a whisper, not a threat, a vow. Kyle power poured into the room like smoke, slow, heavy, commanding. It wasn't a display. He wasn't posturing. He didn't have to. The bond pulsed between us, quiet but sure, like a heartbeat I hadn't noticed until now. Something inside me stirred, not a thought, not even emotion, more like a memory. Not mine, but mine just the same. A forest I'd never walked, a moon I'd never howled under, a name whispered in a language I didn't speak, but still understood. I gasped softly. Kyle's hand brushed the small of my back. Just once. Steadying, claiming. Thalos rose from his seat. If you bring her before this council as mate, we must witness the bond. Kyle nodded once. Then, witness. Before I could move, before I could ask what he meant, he turned me to face him. His hands were warm where they touched my arms, firm, reverent, grounding me in the moment. His gaze held mine. Mary Lena Voss, he said, low and certain. Daughter of blood forgotten, voice of instinct yet to awaken, I claim you under the old ways, not as a prize, not as a shield, but as equal. The room held its breath. He lifted my hand and pressed it over his heart. I offer you my strength, my protection, and my name. My heart stuttered. This wasn't a ceremony. It was a binding, and my body knew it before my mind could catch up. The pendant around my neck, Elira's, grew warm against my skin. The edges hummed. My pulse surged in time with Kyle's. Something unseen stretched between us, a thread pulling tighter. Words came to me, not learned, but remembered. I walk beside you, I whispered. Not behind, not beneath. The heat between our joined hands flashed white-hot, then faded. Gasps echoed from the council, and Elder Thalos stepped back. She remembers the rite, someone said. No one taught her. Not in this lifetime, murmured the silver-haired woman. I staggered slightly, and Kyle caught me. Not possessive, just present. The warmth of him soaked into me. It was done. Not a full mating bond, but the beginning of one. Kyle looked to the council. Now do you see? Thalos stared at me, hard, then slowly, finally, dipped his head. Provisional recognition, he said. She may remain on Pact territory, under your charge. For now, added another voice. Kyle didn't answer. He didn't have to. He guided me out of the chamber, one hand hovering at my back, his presence a shield as much as it was a tether. We walked in silence through the winding corridor, the stone growing warmer as we left the council's cold. When we reached the threshold of the upper hall, I stopped. What did I just do? I asked, my voice barely audible. Kyle turned to face me. You remembered who you were. That wasn't me. It was. It felt like home, he said. And God's help me, it did. The dreams started that night. Not nightmares, not quite. They didn't come with fear, but with something stranger, deeper, like memory or prophecy. I saw a forest I'd never walked, lit by a moon too large for the sky. Trees older than time surrounded me. My hands were bare, streaked with soil and blood. Not human blood, not mine. I knelt at the edge of a stream, the water so clear it showed me not my face, but someone else's. A woman with my eyes, my mouth, my rage. She stared at me like I was the one out of place. You've waited too long, she whispered. I woke up drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me like vines. My skin burned where the pendant rested on my collarbone. I touched it and flinched. The metal pulsed once, warm, almost alive, and then cooled. Outside, the forest was silent, not asleep. Watching. I didn't sleep again. By morning, something in me felt shifted. slightly out of step, my heartbeat slower, my senses louder. When I stepped outside the guest quarters, I knew without turning that Kyle wasn't far. He stood at the edge of the clearing, arms bare, gaze distant, shirt clinging to his chest from an early run. His eyes met mine before I could even think of calling his name. "You felt it," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He walked toward me, not rushed. Just sure, like the earth itself answered to his stride. "What's happening to me?" I asked. His answer was a name. Elira, my grandmother. The ghost of a woman I'd never met, who had vanished before I was born, the one who'd passed me blood I didn't understand. She was powerful, Kyle said, but afraid. She buried what she was to survive, and her daughter, your mother, was born with just enough of it to hide, but it didn't die. He reached out, fingertips brushing the curve of the pendant. It waited. For me? For the right time. I closed my eyes, breathing against the pull in my chest, like something was scratching to get out. Not painful, but constant, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me, and yet did. Kyle's voice dropped. "The wolves don't remember what we lost. Not really. Only the elders do. Only Thalos." I opened my eyes. "He doesn't trust me." "No, but he fears what you carry, which means he respects it." Later that day, I was summoned to the elders' chamber. The room was smaller than the council's den, but colder. Everything in it was made of stone and silence. Scrolls lined the walls, books that looked bound in something older than leather. Thalos sat behind a desk, his hands folded like a priest waiting to confess sins he didn't believe in. "Sit," he said. I sat. He didn't look at me at first, just stared at the candle between us, watching it burn. "You had a vision." I didn't ask how he knew. "I saw her," I said. "Elira." "Not her," he corrected. "The wolf before her. The one who chose to be human." "I don't understand." "You will." He rose, moved to a wall, and pulled a thin book from a high shelf. When he opened it, dust scattered into the air like ash. He laid the book between us. On the open page, drawn in charcoal and age, was a symbol, the same one etched into my pendant. This, he said, was the crest of the Moonshade line. A pack older than the Nightclaw, older than most records. They lived before borders, before politics. They followed instinct, not law. He turned the page. A century ago, they vanished, betrayed from within, hunted, slaughtered, their bloodlines scattered, diluted, lost. "Until me," I whispered. His eyes met mine then, sharp, piercing. "You are a spark of what they were. The last one we've seen in 100 years. The room tilted, not physically, but something inside me dropped. "And that means you're a threat and a possibility." I stood too quickly, my breath caught in my throat. "I didn't choose this." "No, but it chose you." The pendant pulsed again, a quiet thrum against my chest. Thalos closed the book. "Your bond with Kale may protect you, or it may ignite something no one's ready for." I laughed once, bitter. "So I'm a prophecy, or a weapon, or a queen," he said. My heart stopped. "Be careful, Mary Lena. Power like yours doesn't stay hidden long. The others will feel it, not just the wolves." He didn't say Harvey's name. He didn't have to. I left without speaking. The forest was colder now, though the sun was still out. I walked toward the river. My steps were faster than I intended, like I was chasing something or running from it. I didn't hear Kyle approach, but I felt him, that same gravitational shift. "You went to Thalos." I nodded. "What did he say?" "That I'm dangerous." Kyle's mouth tilted, just a little, not a smile. "He's not wrong." I turned to him. "You're not afraid of me?" No. Why not? Because your power doesn't scare me, but your silence does. I blinked. You don't talk about what you're feeling, he said. You carry it, like armor. I've always had to. You don't have to now. The words hit me harder than they should have. I looked away. Kyle stepped closer. What do you feel, right now? I don't know. He reached for my hand, held it between both of his. Then start there. I closed my eyes. I felt the cold water near us, the pull in my chest, the tether between us. I felt watched, not just by Kyle, by the trees, by the blood running through me like it wanted to wake up and burn. I felt inevitable. When I opened my eyes, Kyle's expression had changed. He looked at me like the earth had just shifted under his feet. What? I whispered. Your eyes, he said. They glowed. It started with a letter. Hand-delivered, no insignia, no threats, just heavy cream cardstock embossed with a single name pressed into the center like a brand. Harvey DeLuca. Kyle didn't read it at first. He stared at it in his hand like it was made of poison. I watched from across the room, trying to breathe around the pressure that had been building since my eyes had started glowing 2 nights ago. You should burn it, I said. Kyle's gaze lifted. Calm, controlled, dangerous. If I did, he'd send something less polite. He broke the seal. Read. And when his jaw tensed ever so slightly, I knew Harvey wasn't asking. He invoked parley, Kyle said after a beat. What does that mean? I asked. It means he wants a meeting, formal, observed. I swallowed. And if you refuse? It's seen as an insult, a declaration of intent, a move toward war. I moved toward him. The room felt too small, the air too sharp. He's trying to bait you. Yes. Because of me. Yes. I wanted to scream, or run, or throw something heavy just to hear it break. Instead, I said, So what are you going to do? Kyle folded the letter in half with terrifying care. I'm going. The meeting was set for dusk, on neutral ground, an abandoned cathedral near the edge of the East River. Sacred, in a way. Old bones and forgotten gods. It reeked of history, the kind of place both men would respect. Kyle brought 4 wolves, not his strongest, not his weakest. Just enough to say, I'm not afraid of you, but I'm not stupid. I wore black, simple, sleek, the kind of armor women were taught to use when they had nothing else. Kyle didn't tell me to stay behind. He didn't ask me to come. He simply looked at me once, before the car left, and I said, I'm not letting him speak for me again. The cathedral was colder inside than outside, all stone and shadows. Pews shattered, stained glass long gone, but the altar still stood. Harvey waited at the front, flanked by Marco and 2 others I didn't recognize, all of them in tailored suits, all of them watching like wolves with better PR. Harvey turned when we entered, and he smiled. It wasn't joy, it was possession. Mary, he said, like a caress wrapped in steel. My name in his mouth still made something in me flinch. Not because I missed him, because for 2 years I'd taught myself to need scraps from that voice. Not anymore. Kyle stepped forward. You requested parley. Harvey didn't look at him. I didn't request anything. I demanded. Kyle's eyes darkened. Choose your words carefully, DeLuca. Harvey finally turned to face him fully. You took something that didn't belong to you. I claimed someone who was never yours. Harvey's jaw tightened. You made a spectacle. In front of both worlds. You embarrassed me. She's not a possession, Kyle said, his voice like velvet over knives. You can't be embarrassed by what you never had. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. Stop talking like I'm not here. Both men turned to me. I looked at Harvey. Whatever game this is, whatever old rule you're dusting off to justify your pride, it ends with me. I'm not something to return, or keep, or win. His expression didn't change. You were mine, he said. Everyone knew it. I laughed, sharp and brittle. Everyone knew you wanted me. But you never chose me. You chose appearances. You chose silence. I was protecting you. No. You were protecting yourself. He took a step forward. Kyle wolves bristled. Harvey ignored them. I know you, Mary. I know how your mind works, how you move when you're nervous, how you touch your collarbone when you lie. I know what you look like when you want to be seen, and what it means when you don't speak for hours. He paused. He doesn't know those things. I looked him in the eye. Maybe not, but he sees me. Silence. Harvey's face didn't change, but something inside him cracked. He turned to Kyle. You want her. Fine, you have her. But if you want peace, you'll make it official. You'll walk away from the old ties she had to my world. You'll publicly denounce her human name. Sever her from my family, from my network, from everything that ties her to Manhattan. Kyle didn't answer. I did. No. Harvey blinked. Excuse me? You don't get to rewrite my history just because you're no longer in it. I'm offering a solution. You're offering erasure. Harvey stepped closer. Too close. She's under my protection now, Kyle warned. Harvey didn't flinch. Then let her decide. Kyle didn't look at me. He didn't have to. The choice had always been mine. It had just taken me this long to see it. I stepped between them, and then I looked at Harvey DeLuca, the man who'd kept me close enough to burn but never warm, and said the words I'd never let myself speak. You had your chance. You let me freeze in the shadows while pretending you didn't want to hold me. You made me invisible. You made me forget my name. But I remember now. Harvey didn't move, so I gave him the final blow. I'm not yours. I never was. Kyle moved beside me, not possessively, but like an answer. Harvey's gaze locked with his, and for one terrible moment I thought he might reach for the gun I knew was tucked beneath his coat. But he didn't. He stepped back, then turned, and walked away. The ride back was silent, not tense, just full, like we'd emptied something heavy and now didn't know how to fill the space. When we reached the edge of Kyle's territory, he stopped the car himself, opened the door, walked a few paces into the trees. I followed. The moon was low, the air thick with pine and ash. He turned to me. You didn't have to go. Yes, I did. Even if it meant war. I looked up at him. He wanted me to choose a cage. I didn't. Kyle stepped closer, not touching. Do you regret it? No. I meant it. Even as the wind stirred and the trees whispered, even as the scent of bloodline and bond curled tighter around my ribs, even as the first howls echoed in the distance, not warning, but recognition. Something was coming, but it wasn't Harvey anymore. It was me. The storm rolled in without warning. Not thunder, not rain, just silence, thick and electric, curling through the city like a warning no one could name. The kind of quiet that makes birds disappear and dogs pace the walls. It started at the river's edge, where the old industrial bridge split neutral territory from Kyle's borderland. A strip of crumbling steel and rusted beams no one cared about anymore. Except tonight. Tonight, it was the line. On one side, wolves. On the other, suits. Harvey arrived first, black cars purring like jungle cats along the concrete. His men stepped out in unison, sharp and still, their hands near holsters, their eyes scanning the dark like the danger hadn't already arrived. Kyle stood at the heart of the clearing on our side of the bridge. No car, no entourage, just Rowan and two other enforcers flanking him like shadows. I stood behind him, every inch of my skin vibrating with something I didn't understand. Something that had only grown since I stood in that cathedral and told Harvey I was never his. But tonight, none of that mattered, because war had finally come. Harvey crossed first. He walked like he always had, unbothered, polished, calculated, as if the world had yet to deliver him a consequence he couldn't bury. He stopped just short of Kyle. "Last chance," he said, voice calm. "Step down." Kyle didn't blink. "She's not yours to bargain. She was mine long before you scented her. And yet here we are." Harvey's jaw ticked. A low growl rumbled from Rowan's chest. The wolves behind him shifted their weight, every motion a threat barely leashed. Guns clicked on side, safeties disengaged with the ease of men used to ending things quickly. One wrong move and the river would run red. I stepped forward. Kyle's arm shot out to stop me, but I slipped past it, not fast, deliberate. "Enough," I said. Everyone turned. Their eyes weren't on Kyle anymore, not on Harvey. They were on me. I walked until I stood between them, my heels scraping softly against the metal of the bridge. Above us, the sky was blank. No moon, just dark and the low hum of something ancient building in my chest. "If this is about pride, end it." Neither man spoke. "If this is about me," I said, voice sharper now, "then take it from me. I'm standing right here." Kyle's voice was low, controlled. "Mary, I won't be the reason this city burns." Harvey stepped forward. "Then surrender." Kyle growled. I turned to Harvey. "You still don't get it, do you? I get that people have died for less than this." I felt it snap then, that invisible thread between fear and fury, between what I was and what I would not allow. "You want me?" I said. "Fine." I unfastened the pendant from my neck, the metal glowing faintly in the dark. "Then take it." I held it out like an offering. But before Harvey could move, Kyle did. He stepped forward fast, too fast, and Harvey's man reacted. A gun raised. A shot cracked through the air. Time fractured. Kyle staggered. I saw blood bloom through his shirt, dark and spreading. He didn't fall, not yet, but he dropped to one knee, one hand pressed against his side, breath shuddering through clenched teeth. I screamed his name. Everything exploded. Rowan lunged, shifting midair, a blur of silver and fang. Harvey's men opened fire. Wolves answered with roars that shattered windows. The bridge shook under the force of it. Bodies colliding, steel groaning, rage igniting in every direction. But I couldn't hear any of it, because Kyle was bleeding, and something inside me cracked wide open. I dropped to my knees beside him. His hand reached for mine, fingers slick with blood. "Stay back," he rasped. I didn't. I pressed my hand to his wound. And then, the world caught fire. Not with flame, with light. It erupted from me, from the center of my chest, from a place I hadn't known existed. A pulse, a wave, like thunder rolled through the marrow of the world. Everything stopped, literally. Wolves froze mid-lunge. Bullets hung suspended in air, glittering like raindrops in a flash of lightning. Harvey's men stood like statues, mouths half-formed in battle cries, eyes wide with terror. Only Kyle moved, his eyes locked on mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not desire, not dominance, awe. The pendant in my hand glowed white-hot. The bridge trembled. A wind screamed through the gap between us and the river, and every living thing held its breath. Then I spoke, not in English, not in any language I'd ever learned, but the words came from my throat like they'd been waiting centuries. The sky answered, the power burst outward, and then silence. When it faded, I was on the ground, Kyle's arms around me, holding me like I might vanish. All around us, men were on their knees. Wolves were still. Even Harvey knelt, not from choice, from instinct. Kyle's voice was a whisper in my hair. "You stopped time." I shook, not from fear, from power. It stopped for me. He pulled back just enough to look at me. You burned the bond open. I didn't know what that meant, but I felt it. In every cell, every breath, every inch of skin now thrumming with the rhythm of something more than human. I looked up, and every eye, man and wolf alike, was on me. Not because I was claimed. Because I had become something they didn't have a name for, something they would bow to, the queen not chosen. The queen awakened. The air didn't move after the light faded. It hung still and reverent, like the world itself was trying to understand what had just happened. The scent of scorched steel clung to the night, mingling with blood and ozone and something older, older than wolves, older than war. Magic. Mine. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady but not weak. Kael rising with me, one hand still wrapped around my wrist, like if he let go, the storm might take me with it. I didn't blame him. I wasn't sure what I'd become either. Around us, silence reigned. Not one bullet had landed, not one claw had found flesh. Every creature, every man, every wolf on that bridge was still kneeling, eyes wide, heads lowered, including Harvey. I stared at him. The man who had once made me feel like less, like something to be handled in private and dismissed in public, now knelt in blood and shadow, not out of remorse, out of fear. He looked up at me then, and I saw it, the fracture. He didn't recognize me, not really. To him, I was no longer the woman he ignored in hallways, the woman who bent herself into smaller shapes to survive his silence. I was something else now, not his equal. His reckoning. He rose slowly, as if standing too fast might draw the power's attention back to him. You don't know what you've done, he said. I tilted my head. Then explain it. You've disrupted balance, made yourself a target. There are others who will come now, elders who do not kneel. You're not just claimed anymore, you're contested. Kael stepped forward. Then let them come. But I raised a hand. No, I said. He's right. Kael turned toward me, sharp. Mary, I need to know what this is. I looked back at Harvey. So tell me. His jaw tightened. Your blood. Voss blood. It belonged to a line thought extinct, one that once rivaled Kael's. But the wolves who carried it didn't believe in power by rule. They believed in instinct, in bond, in fire, and it made them dangerous. He gestured at the bridge. This, what you did, that was Voss fire, and it hasn't been seen in over 100 years. And now? Harvey's gaze flicked to Kael, then to the wolves still kneeling behind him. Now it changes everything. Then he turned and walked away, not defeated, but fleeing something he couldn't outmaneuver with wealth or threat. Me. They gathered at dawn. Elders, enforcers, wolves who hadn't spoken my name before tonight, and now spoke it like a prayer or a warning. The pack council convened on sacred ground, the circle of stones buried deep in Kael's territory. It was a place used only for judgment, for vows, for blood. This morning, it was for me. Kael stood beside me in silence, dressed not for war, but for ceremony. Black linen, silver accents, bare arms marked with old runes. He hadn't left my side since the bridge, but this wasn't his moment. It was mine. Elder Thalos stepped into the circle last. He moved with purpose, no hesitation, no fear, and when he met my eyes, there was something in his gaze I hadn't seen before. Not skepticism, recognition. He stopped in front of me, close enough to smell the ash still clinging to my skin, and then he knelt. The shift in the air was instant. Wolves gasped, elders looked to one another. The forest itself seemed to lean in. I didn't breathe. Thalos's voice was clear. Steady. We have not seen power like this in our time. Not in generations. It is not learned. It is not forced. It is blood-born, soul-bound, ancient. He looked up at me. You are not just claimed. You are not just chosen. You are descended of Alpha Fire, and in you it has wakened. Silence. Then, one by one, the others followed. Wolves lowered their heads. Elders bent knees stiff from centuries. Even Rowan, Kyle beta, who bowed to no one but his king, knelt with eyes cast down. Kyle didn't move. He didn't have to. Because he wasn't bowing to me. He had already risen with me. My hand found his. His fingers closed around mine, rough and sure. You okay? He murmured. I don't know, I whispered. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was weight, responsibility, something primal that had crawled up from the marrow of my mother's bones and taken its place behind my ribs. I wasn't just Mary Lena anymore. I was the flame that survived extinction, and now the wolves knew it too. Later, Thalos summoned me alone. We sat beneath an ancient tree, the heartroot, Kale had called it, a tree older than the packs, older than the city that had grown over this land like moss on stone. You will be challenged, he said without preamble. There are those who will not accept your rise, not because you are unworthy, but because they are afraid. Afraid of what? He studied me. That you'll remind them power doesn't belong to the loudest, or the oldest, or the strongest. That it belongs to those who carry truth in their blood. I looked at my hands. They didn't glow anymore, but they still trembled with the memory of it. I didn't ask for this. No, he said. But you didn't run from it either. He reached into his robe and handed me something wrapped in cloth. A ring. Silver, heavy, carved with the moonshade crest, the forgotten sibling to Kyle's own line. A sigil of fire, of instinct, of me. I closed my fingers around it, and for the first time, it felt like it fit. That night, Kyle brought me to the edge of the forest. The city pulsed beyond the trees, lights winking in the distance like the past, trying to tempt me back. You still have a choice, he said quietly. To leave? To walk between worlds, yours, mine, build your own. I looked at him, this man who had crossed the room once and shattered everything I thought I knew. I think I already am. His smile was small, fierce. Then he knelt, not in deference, not in worship, in promise. My queen, he said, and for the first time, I believed it. 6 months later, New York felt different, not louder, not softer, just slower beneath my feet, like the pulse of the city now moved in time with mine. The same skyline stretched above the rooftops, the same tangled rhythm of sirens and steam, but I saw it all through a lens that hadn't existed before. Power didn't look the way I used to think it did. It wasn't in boardrooms or underground bank vaults or whispered names carved into marble. It wasn't Harvey DeLuca's icy control or even Kyle Raventhorn's gravity. Power was knowing who you are when no one's watching. And who you refuse to be when everyone is. They called me queen now, not just in hushed corners of the supernatural underground, but in the way they moved around me, in the eyes that lowered when I passed, in the war that never came because no one wanted to test what it would cost. I didn't rule because Kyle claimed me. I ruled because I burned and didn't ask permission. The city had learned that. So had the packs. And Harvey. He'd vanished. His empire cracked in half under the weight of silence and fear. Some said he'd fled the country. Others said he lived in exile, still watching, still waiting. But no one said his name aloud anymore. Not in front of me. Because everyone remembered the bridge. They remembered the light, and they remembered who had stopped time. Kyle stood beside me now in the heart of our shared territory, No longer just the Alpha King of the Nightclaw pack, but the mate of a woman reborn. His hand was warm in mine, his expression unreadable as always, except for the way his thumb brushed my palm like a quiet vow. The summit was happening in the same place it had all begun, the Javits Center. But this time, I wasn't hidden behind a clipboard. I walked through the marble hall in black silk and silver heels, head high, every step echoing like a memory reformed. No more shadows, no more silence. I didn't need permission to exist in this space anymore. I was the reason it still held together. Factions who once spat at the idea of wolf and human alliance now watched me with careful deference. The Pack Council, reformed and less ancient in face and ideology, stood near the eastern wing. Elder Thalos at their helm, his eyes still sharp, but softer when they found me. He bowed, just slightly. I nodded back, a gesture of acknowledgement, of history, of the war that never had to be fought because one woman decided she wouldn't be a pawn. Kael's voice brushed against my ear. "They're waiting for you." "I know. You ready?" I turned to him and smiled. "Always." Together, we stepped onto the central dais, where once, 6 months ago, I'd stood behind a velvet rope and watched power move like it didn't know my name. Now it bent. And when I spoke, the room quieted. "We've rewritten the order," I said, voice steady. Not because we tore it down, but because we revealed what was already broken. No one interrupted. The old world built its laws on dominance, on secrecy, on fear. But fear doesn't keep the blood from spilling. Fear doesn't keep empires from burning. Trust does, and I don't ask for yours, I expect it, because I've earned it. My gaze swept across them all. And if that's not enough for you, then you're welcome to try and take it back. A ripple of tension, then stillness, and respect, the kind you don't win by screaming, the kind you take by surviving. Kael's hand found mine again as we stepped down. No applause, just the heavy hush of power shifting again, quietly, permanently. Outside, the city pulsed like it always had. Cars, horns, lights stacked in towers. But now, I saw it for what it was. Not a cage. A kingdom. And I hadn't just been chosen to rule it. I had chosen myself. The moon was full over the river. It hung low and wide, casting silver over the water like a crown placed gently on the earth. The city hummed in the distance, a quiet throb of light and life. But here, on the edge of Kael's territory, it was nothing but trees, wind, and us. I stood barefoot on the riverbank, the hem of my dress trailing over soft grass, the air cool against my skin. No audience, no council, no war drum or whispered titles, just quiet, just breath, just now. Kael came up behind me without a sound, as he always did. His presence warmed the space before he even touched me. When he wrapped his arms around my waist, it wasn't a claiming, it was home. "You keep coming back to this place," he murmured against my hair. I smiled. "It's where everything ended." His mouth brushed the curve of my shoulder. "It's where everything started." We stood like that for a long time. The past didn't claw at me anymore. I could think of Harvey now without pain, without rage. He had been the catalyst, the rejection that revealed the truth. I had always belonged to myself. Kael hadn't rescued me. He'd witnessed me, chosen me, yes, but never tried to own me. That made all the difference. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm listening." "To what?" "To the way the world sounds when it's not burning." He chuckled low in his chest and pressed his mouth to my neck. "You're dangerous when you're poetic." "I'm dangerous all the time." He turned me gently in his arms, so I faced him, his hands cupping my jaw like I was made of something he still couldn't quite believe was real. "You're mine," he said, voice soft but anchored. I nodded, eyes locked to his. "And you're mine." He kissed me then, not as a king, not as a wolf, but as a man who had stood at the edge of ruin and chosen love over war. When we pulled apart, I pressed my palm to his chest, right over the steady beat of his heart. "Whatever comes next," I whispered, "we meet it together." He covered my hand with his. "As king and queen." I shook my head slowly. "As equals, as fire and instinct, as the ones who changed the world and didn't flinch." Above us, the moon kept watch. Below it, two legends stood in the clearing, and somewhere in the deep wild, the old gods stirred and smiled. The bloodline lived, and she had crowned herself.